Well, hello, and welcome to another great question and answer session here at the My Endurance Hub space. I'm the head coach and your host of these little sessions, Jasper Blake. And if you've been here before, you're either familiar with me and enjoying that, or I annoy you if it's too much. Um, anyway, great to be back here. And I see we already have some people trickling in here. I'll maybe give it 30, 60 seconds more just to let some other people get in here if needed. And just a reminder of how this works. Down at the bottom right of your screen there, you should see a little chat bubble. If you do have a question, please throw it in there. That's where I am mostly checking. There is the raise your hand function. But again, I've never had anybody do that. So if you do that, I might miss it. Post your stuff in the chat. That's the easiest for me. And, I have yet to not get to all the questions. So throw them in there. No question is a silly question. They're all great. And chances are, if you have a question, other people will have the same one as well. So reminder that these are all recorded. Of course, it's only my face that you can see on here. So don't worry about, how you look. It's all good. People can maybe see your names in the chat function, but that's about it. So, but they are recorded. So if you want to go back and review, you can find them in the My Endurance Hub space, along with all the other amazing content that we've created in there. Daily endurance moments, the training programs, which are getting so much attention now, which is awesome. And master classes. We got so much great stuff in there. I really hope that people are taking advantage of that, along with these question and answers. These question and answer periods have been really received well. We've had great attendance and some really great questions. On a side note, we are just about to cross the 900 member threshold. I can't believe I'm saying that. It's so exciting to see the response to this little community. Not so little anymore. And I love it because, the more the merrier. We're getting people from all over the world, which is so exciting. Real testament to how sport brings people together. And, endurance sports exist all over the planet. And, big brands like Ironman, they put their races all over the planet as well. And I think it's been great to see the response. Lots of people joining. So thank you. If you're a new member, thank you. It's great to have you on board. Let's dive in here. We have a couple guests, and I see some comments already. Devin says hello and enjoying it. Thanks, Devin. Devin's a regular, I think, and great to have you back, Devin. And thanks for your enthusiasm and always jumping in with questions. There was a question, actually, I'll get to near the end about, I'll have to go back and review, but it was about, I think it might have been Devin that posted it, which you're free to do as well. Please post any questions you have in the discussion or the chat with your coach part of the My Endurance Hub space. And about how to, I think, manage recovery or maximize, training as you get a bit older, which certainly I fit into that category now. And so let's jump in. James as well. Hi, James, and thanks for joining us. Excuse me. Let's start with James's question first. What is your favorite workout, biking and swimming or running, and why? Well, that's a good question. I mean, I was mostly a natural runner. The other two sports were a little more challenging for me. Running was the most natural thing for me and the one that I excelled the most at. It was a great and fun way to do triathlons because, of course, the running's at the end. And so my strength was at the end. And in a triathlon, I feel like that strength is often magnified because people are very tired. And so, when the run started in a triathlon, it was my opportunity to work my way through the field. And I was often successful at that. And so I have a lot of good memories and feelings from the run portion. Now, my favorite workouts, that's a different story. I really did enjoy various workouts in the different sports. I enjoyed the workouts that really challenged me mentally and physically. A few come to mind. So, hill repeats on the bike, I always really enjoyed. Again, probably because that was a strength of mine. I'm a smaller athlete, so climbing hills on the bike I was a little better at than outright flat time trialing, which I was not as good at. So I enjoyed workouts where maybe I felt a little better about myself, especially in groups. Um, I really enjoyed, we used to do these sets at, I swam at the University of Guelph, and a staple in our program, Tuesdays and Thursdays, we had these threshold workouts, always about 3,000 meters of work. So the total workout itself would be about 4 to 5,000 with the warm up and the cool down. But the main set was always about 3,000 meters. And it was anything from 60 times 50 to 30 times 100 to 15 times 200, 10 times 300. You get the idea. Shorter intervals at a high pace, very, very challenging. You'd get through the first few and wonder how you're going to make it to the end. And I think what I liked about those is there was a meditative element to it, 30 times 100, which we did a lot of with, 10 to 15 seconds rest. They were always on a pace time. When I say that, I mean like we would do 30 times 100 on 130 or on 90 seconds. And so every time 90 seconds came around, you'd have to go again. So we'd aim to be 110 to 115 for those reps. And there was a very meditative quality to those workouts that I enjoyed. A huge amount of discomfort for, about 45 minutes. And you'd wonder every time, you would wonder if you were going to make it through that workout. And 99% of the time you would. And so you'd come to the end of it with a great sense of accomplishment. And I really enjoyed that. I felt I would come off of those workouts and, maybe be tired the next day, but the day after I felt like a genius in the pool. I felt amazing because I had this really high tolerance for the work. So I like that. Favorite workouts running, probably a little different. I really enjoyed the off-season runs where I would go disappear in the forest for 2 hours with no, maybe a watch to make sure I got back on time, but no pace, no GPS, no, nothing like that. It was just out in the forest, and I'd get lost a lot of time, not really lost, but discover new trails and up and down and through mud. Mostly in the fall is the off season, especially the northern hemisphere here. That's sort of September through November. I think those were my favorite runs because you disconnect a little bit and just get back to the roots of why I like doing sport anyway, which is to just be out in nature. And I really enjoyed those. So I really like that question, James. Thanks. And it had, like a lot of my questions, not one very clear, concise answer, like 10 different answers for you. And I also, I'll add to that. Another thing I really love about sport is that, you could ask 10 different people and they'll give you 10 different answers on what their favorite is. It's kind of cool. Devin says, can you talk about how to manage injuries, like when to push through and when to rest and or get treatment? This is a great question, Devin. Thank you for that. Well, first and foremost, how to manage injuries. So I'll take your question as I already have an injury, and what do I do about it? A huge believer in using pain as your guide. So your body is this wonderful thing, and it will give you signals. It will give you information. It will talk to you. The trouble we have often, our egos get in the way and we don't listen. But if your body is in pain, and we have to determine between good pain and bad pain. So, good pain is what I just described in that swim workout where you're doing 30 times 100. It's 45 minutes of, very, very hard efforts. And you wonder how you're going to make it through. And there's a ton of discomfort and it's a bit painful. That's good pain. You're applying a training stress to your body and you're going to get better. Bad pain is I have an injury. So, I've, tweaked a muscle, or something's up. And usually we can tell the difference between good and bad pain. So what I would say is if you have bad pain from an injury, then use pain as your guide. So if you're doing something that's causing more pain, then stop doing that thing. Now, we have 3 sports to work with in triathlon. Extend that out to endurance sports, and we can include cross-country skiing, we can include mountain biking, we can include elliptical trainers, we can include all kinds of other activities where we might not experience pain in that injured area. And so we can lean on those sports and we can work on those a bit. Heart and lungs generally don't know the difference. It's muscle specificity that we have to work on. But if you're injured, if you have a running injury, but bike riding's fine, then you can just do a little bit more bike riding and maybe work on that a little bit. So that's one way to manage injuries. I don't really encourage people to ever push through if it's really painful. There's not much to be gained. You can always obviously lean on the advice of a medical professional. Sometimes there are things that if it's painful, you're not doing any more damage, but I don't want to be the one to tell you that. You need to talk to a physio or a doctor or somebody who really knows what's going on with that particular thing and take their advice. But generally, the best course of action is rest. The body is this amazingly wonderful thing that repairs itself. It's incredible. So, you cut your finger and 10 days later and your body's repaired it. But if you take that cut finger and you keep every day, you rub it on sandpaper, it's probably not going to get better. It's probably going to get infected. It's probably going to get worse. If you just give it a little space, maybe make sure it's really clean, that will heal. And that's very true of many other injuries in the body. Now, let's say you have an extreme injury like a stress fracture or ligament damage or, any of these other things that do require treatment. Well, I think if you have an injury that's lasting longer than a few days and it's very painful, you need to go get it checked out. So, start with a medical professional, sports doctor, physio, chiropractor. The thing I've learned over the years is that all of those professions are going to come at that injury with their own bias, would be a bit of a strong word. They'll see it from the perspective of what they've learned. And it's not, good or bad. You might, if you have an injury, you might go to a chiropractor and they'll tell you one thing and a physio will tell you another thing. And an athletic trainer might tell you something else. And a doctor might even tell you something else. If it's really bad and you can get some imaging like x-rays and MRIs and all these other things, where you can actually see exactly what's going on, then that's a great step if that's available to you. Sometimes in healthcare situations, it takes a long time to get imaging done. I often wish that I had existed in a top end pro sport. So let's say the NFL, my guess is all of those teams have MRI machines in their locker room. I don't know if that's true, but my guess is if they have something that's up, they get it imaged right away. They know exactly what it is, and then they have a clear path forward. What a medical professional will do is hopefully get you close to that and recommend what you need to do. So, again, if it's very painful, it's not going away, seek medical attention, or a professional opinion sooner rather than later, because you can get on top of it, you can get a clear diagnosis, and you can create a clear path forward, which is helpful. Thanks for that question. James Anderson, did you ever compete in any crazy conditions? Oh yeah, gosh, I had a race in South Africa many years ago. It was the most unbelievable rain I have ever experienced on the bike. Like to this day, I'll never forget it. It was absolutely torrential. And so that one comes to mind. My first Ironman ever in 2000 at Ironman Canada, we actually had snow/hail at the top of one of the main climbs. Often that race is very hot, but we had this weird weather system blow through, and it got very cold at the top of one of those climbs. I think that's pretty cool. Well, cool figuratively and literally. I like cold conditions, and I do like the extreme conditions as long as everybody's safe. Obviously, we've had a few examples in the last few weeks of extreme conditions that did not end well for people. Very tragic losses of life at the Ironman Ireland event, and so I don't mean that. I never wish that on people, but I did take great pleasure and pride when conditions were tough because I thought I could do better. I did some winter triathlon for quite a while. This was a sport that involves running on snow, biking on snow, and then cross-country skiing. And so we had some interesting conditions at some of those races with snow and cold and high altitude. And so, yeah, lots of stuff like that. I like that. That's what all I can think of. Nothing too crazy, actually, in all the years that I competed. Nothing too bad. Devin says you're very inspirational, but who is your inspiration? Aw, Devin, that's very sweet. Thanks. Um, that's a great question. I don't know. I don't think I can really say it's any one person, but I do very much appreciate inspirational moments. And I think what's really neat is if you really look, every athlete at some point will give you something to be inspired by. And, a lot of situations come to mind. I can even think back to my university running days. I was part of the University of Guelph running team, and they had a little dynasty going. They won many, many CIAU national titles. I was on that team, but I was always an alternate. I was, I was good enough to be on the team, but not always good enough to be in the main, group that was running. I think you had to have your top 5 or 6 athletes or something, and I was always at the back end of that. So a lot of times I actually got to watch and witness my teammates, um, and a lot of inspiring moments there. Just young college kids, on the men's and women's side, just gutting it out in crazy fall conditions in Ontario, and some very very close competitions between a lot of the runners from other schools. So I have great inspiration there. Um, you know, I think I'm inspired now as a coach when I see I've had athletes that finish Ironman in 16 plus hours, and I can tell you there's a few things that are as inspirational as that. Um, I used to come in the 8 to 9 hour range, and I can't imagine being out there for twice as long. This is unbelievable to me. And people with bodies that are all shapes and sizes. Often we think of the lean, tall, endurance athlete. But I think what's really neat about triathlon is it attracts people of all shapes and sizes. And I find great inspiration in people who it's you can tell it's a lot tougher for them. I know one guy that we've worked with for years is as high mesomorphic as you can imagine. I mean, looks like a weightlifter. He looks like a bodybuilder, but he loves endurance sports, and I can only imagine how tough it is for him to get through some of these events because he's just like the opposite of an endurance athlete naturally, and I find that quite extraordinary. I mean, he's so much mind over matter, which is amazing. Um, I find inspiration for sure in I love sport at the highest level. I love the Olympics. I witnessed Simon Whitfield winning the Olympic Games in 2000. Few things will ever compare to how inspiring that was. That was amazing. I in any sport at the high level, I love it. I absolutely love it. Whether it's NHL playoffs, whether it's tennis, whether it's the World Rugby Championships are happening right now, and I just am fascinated by different athletes and different sports and how different mindsets and different bodies excel in different ways. And yeah, I'm sorry to be so vague. I wish I could just say it was Michael Jordan, which was also very inspiring. But it's not. It's many, many instances of inspiring moments, and the beauty about that is it never runs out for me. Until the day I die, I'll be able to see inspiration. I think in different sports. My daughter's a figure skater now, very inspired by that. Inspired mostly by how relentlessly those kids have to fail and fail and fail and fail and fail before they get something, and it shows a lot of courage. I find that amazing. So anyway, we've gone on and on. Thanks for the question, Devin. James says, "Who's your favorite triathlete of all time and why?" Oh my gosh, that's tough. Again, I hate to do this. I wish I could just pick one person. Um, I think over the years, I've got to know personally a lot of athletes. I mentioned Simon Whitfield before. In his sort of peak years as a triathlete, he was amazing. He was such a competitor, incredible competitor, won lots of World Cups. And, he just had an ability to rise up when it really mattered in those shorter distances. And that was really fun to watch. Um, I think Lori Bowden comes to mind. I'm picking people from my generation, late 90s, early 2000s. She was remarkable. She was back in the day when you could, now all the athletes are very proficient across all three sports, swim, bike, run. The ones that win are really kind of up there the whole time. But back in the early days, people were generally very weak in one of the three events or even two. And Lori was an unexceptional swimmer, let's say. She might not like to hear that. I doubt she's ever going to watch this. But she would come out of the water with a massive deficit. And I can only imagine, getting that feedback in the race and, hearing the time deficit. But she would get on her bike and she'd just pick her way through the field. And then she was a brilliant runner. And of course, she won Hawaii a couple times, along with a whole bunch of other, Ironman events. Gosh, yeah, I think the Norwegians are exciting right now. I really like that. I like Lucy Charles is pretty cool. She's seems like a real fighter. I kind of like her take on it. She's sort of always out there for battle. I think that's pretty cool. Flora Duffy comes to mind. We do a lot of training camps in Bermuda. What I love about Flora is she comes from, I don't want to say humble beginnings, like she was probably always very strong in the Bermuda triathlon scene, but Bermuda itself is just tiny, it's like 60,000 people or something. And she won the last Olympics for the women. And, kind of united a whole nation. I think it was their first ever gold medal in Olympic Games. And there was a lot on her shoulders carrying a small country like that. And she rose up, and I think she'd had, a couple times before where it didn't work out and, wasn't as successful as she'd hoped, but she nailed it at the last one. That was pretty cool. Look, my answers are terrible. I can't just ever give you one. I'm too fickle. But there's a few examples of athletes, I think, that triathletes in particular, that have been very, very cool. So Devin says, what are some of the chafing brands or chafing products and brands that you use? Hey, that's a great question. Actually, there is a local company, I say local, I guess depending on where you are, in Vancouver, BC, which is very close to where we are. It's actually an athlete I coach started a really cool company called 120%, 120%. And it's kind of a play on the idea that you can't really give more than 100%, but a lot of times we say we're going to give it 120%. Anyway, their company has a couple different chafing products. They've made men's and women's specific products. They're all really high-end natural ingredients. That's a great one to check out. I think I've gone, back in the early days, it would be Vaseline, just straight off the shelf from a pharmacy. And you can never really go wrong with that, except for the fact that it's probably not that good for you. So I'm sure there's a lot more healthy products out there now, but in a pinch, that'll work. I actually used to use silicone powder in my shoes. So a long time ago, there was like an anti-chafing company, and it was like a powder that you could put in your shoes. That was very, very helpful. Yeah, so it's something to consider. It's very important to consider that, because it's a real shame if your race is derailed by chafing, because it's so preventable. Another thing I used to do is use double layered socks on the run. So I did have a problem with blisters, like I think most athletes do in the marathon portion of an Ironman, because it's just a lot of time, right? Like I ran my first couple Ironmans in bare feet in, no socks. I really paid the price, gutted through it, but then I'd be off of training for a couple of weeks because the blisters were so bad, and that wasn't good. But I got into this habit of wearing double layered socks. They were very thin, and the layers of the socks would rub against each other. And I found that to be really, really good. So, there's a few different tips for you to use, but I would search out a bit, definitely check out that 120% company, because I know the ingredients and the way they developed it is really high end and really good. If you're going to put something on your body, it's good to have products that are good and you're not going to be harmful. Yeah, so I think those are a couple there. It looks like there's no more questions coming in, but I do want to address the question that was left in our chat. Again, I forget if it was Devin or somebody about how to manage training when you get a bit older. And I'll just say really quickly, there's a couple things to consider. One is, it's not a foregone conclusion that when we get older, it takes a little bit more time to recover. But generally speaking, that's my experience and the experience I've had when I talk to other older athletes. So, one of the things to consider is you may not be able to manage the same training load that you did before. And it's okay to have a little bit of extra recovery after those harder training sessions. That would be the thing I'd consider most with age. But I'm a big believer too. You keep moving your body and you keep applying stress and recovering from it, you'll stay strong for a long time. I think the people that get into trouble are the ones that, they get into the mid 40s, mid 50s, and they kind of just shut it down and don't really do much. Maybe for fear of it, or maybe they just don't have the energy anymore. But it's counterintuitive. I think usually when you apply that stress, as long as you recover, you get energy. I get energy from workouts. I get energy from that training stress. And so, it's like use it or lose it mentality. And that goes for different types of training too. A lot of times as we age, we cut out the faster, higher end stuff. But yeah, I don't think you need to do that either. We often cut out resistance training or strength training as we get older, which is bonkers. I mean, of all the things you should keep in, that's probably one of the highest priorities, is to lift heavy stuff around, as long as you're doing it safely in a controlled environment. And if you don't know what you're doing, get the advice of a professional. But those are a few things as we age, like recovery time maybe increase a little bit. You just probably need to be a little more diligent with all the finer details: nutrition, sleep, recovery. When we're younger, I got a 15-year-old son. It appears at this moment that this guy can get away with anything. His diet's not particularly great. He's very picky with food. There's a few things, but I'm like, this kid can just go forever. He's lean and wiry, and he's got all the incredible hormones that we get at, in that age, like sort of peak kind of like aggression hormones, I guess you'd call them. That sounds a bit aggressive. I don't mean that, but they're kind of like those ones that make us strong. And so maybe in the younger years you can get away with more, but as we age, we have to be a little more diligent and lean into all the good things. So hopefully that answers your question. Got another question here. This is great, from Devin. Do you track your stats and performance with any tools or apps? How do you read them and learn what's needed to improve performance? Okay, so the answer is twofold. For my own self, no. When I retired from racing, I needed a huge break from power meters and heart rates. And, I'd spent so many years really diving into that data every single day and, obsessing over it at times. And so for my own personal training, I actually don't. I have an old school Ironman Timex watch. It has no power, no heart rate, no pace. Part of it's I don't want to know how slow I'm going now. I want to remember the old me. I'm just kidding. No, I just like going, if I'm going to run in the trails, I'll get intensity through the climbs, and I can lose myself in the forest. I don't really care how fast I'm going anymore. However, in my coaching life, yes, I'm constantly analyzing files. I dive very deep into people's, wattage files on the bike. If I'm giving them a specific set that I want them to target specific wattages, then yeah, I'm checking that out. So yeah, with the people I coach, probably 90% fall into the category of really liking diving into the stats and knowing the numbers. So we track those through mainly, smartwatches like a Garmin watch, or there's other brands as well, but they'll upload to the platforms we use like Training Peaks or Final Surge. And then we can look at the files and we can analyze how that workout went. We can cross-reference wattage with heart rate and other metrics to see how that workout was, whether they executed it properly, whether improving over time, that kind of thing. So, how do you read them and learn what's needed to improve performance? Well, one of the things that we'll do, throughout the season is testing. So, we'll run through a training block, and then we'll put athletes through different testing protocols. We'll try and make them the same from time to time so that we can look back, cross-reference from the last one. Protocols are the same, and so we can see improvements. We can also see improvements in real time with race results. That's probably the best way. We used to say that some people were good on paper. So you might have an athlete who's exceptional when they do testing and exceptional in training. They're, good on paper, but then when it comes to racing, they're not as great. And we also would have the opposite, athletes that were not necessarily awesome in training, or maybe at testing, they didn't really give their best, but then they'd show up at races and do really well. I personally would prefer the latter for people. But they can both happen. The best top athletes are generally good in both counts. But really, the best way to measure performance, the most, relevant way, is how are you doing at the events you want to compete in. You might have the highest FTP in the world, but you can't perform in races. Which would you rather have? I personally rather have a lower FTP, but I do well at races. But again, usually they go hand in hand. So how do you read them and learn what's needed to improve performance? So again, I'll address that. One of the testing protocols we use is called INSIDE testing. It's a 4-test protocol that we run athletes through. And what it gives us is a really specific outline of where athletes are weak and where they're strong. And more specifically, what are they getting ready for, and where do they need to be strong, and where does it not matter if they're weaker? So testing will often help us with that. We can look at, the numbers that an athlete is producing, and we can say, okay, maybe they're really strong in this area, but that's not necessarily relevant for what they're trying to accomplish. And so then we can apply training stress to move them in the right direction. That's as simple as it gets. Training is actually really simple. You decide what you want to be good at, and then you apply appropriate training stress to get you there. And you just repeat. It's not to oversimplify it, but sometimes I think we overcomplicate it. Yeah. So I hope that answers that question. It's a good one. Okay. I don't see any more questions in there. If you have one, definitely pop it in. And it looks like we got pretty much to all of them, which is great. Yeah, I'll maybe give it one more minute here. And if I don't see any more, that we'll make it a wrap for this week. Thanks for being flexible, by the way. I had to move the start time half an hour, so I appreciate people still joining us a little bit later. Devin says thanks. James says thanks. I'll take that as a sign that we can sign off, because those are our participants. So yeah, thanks so much for joining us, you guys. I always really, really appreciate your enthusiasm. And again, if you want to check out the recordings, jump into the My Endurance Hub space. You can find them in there. And yeah, check out all the other great stuff too. Again, we're just about to cross the 900 member threshold, and I'm just so excited about that. It's awesome. So thanks again, and we'll see you next week, same time, back at 10:30 next week. Okay, everybody, take care.